Good morning. First of all, giving honor to God. I am very honored to be here this morning. I want to also give honor and respect to Pastor Bob and Ms. Kathy and to the leadership of the church, members and visitors. I've been going to church all my life, and I see pastors do a little bit of everything. And I've been knowing Pastor Bob for a long time, but I didn't know that he played the drums also. And got a little swagger on him. Well, it is, again, first, it's an opportunity to get here and talk to everyone. I do want to say that I do appreciate you all and thank you all for the relationship that Hope Lutheran Church has had with APDS, the Africentric Personal Development Shop, over the years. It's been tremendous in terms of us working with the kids, and I don't see any difference in us. Our missions are the same, and it's about improving the quality of life for everyone. So just want to say thank you, and I do appreciate you for that. I'm going to talk just a little bit of time here. As Pastor said, my father's a minister, and he was passed away, and he was my first hero. My mother was also passed away, my first true love. So I'm standing here on their shoulders. So I won't take long, like my father would take a long time, and he would also sing quite a bit, and those things I don't do too well. So I'll talk a little bit about history, since we're celebrating Black History Month. I'll talk a little bit about that first, share a few things, share and celebrate a few accomplishments that you may or may not know, but that we usually don't typically talk about during Black History Month. And then on the second part, I'll tie into the theme, which is Bridge to Tomorrow. And so that will be the second and the last part of what I'll be doing here in terms of sharing with you. So let's start off with the, obviously we know that history goes way back, way back. And there's some discussion whether it's 10,000 or 100,000 or a million years ago. But we're going to bring it right up here to the United States and start here in America and start with the Underground Railroad that started down in Maysville, Kentucky. I'm not sure exactly what year that it started, but I know that it started right on the other side of the Ohio River in Maysville, Kentucky. And they do, there's a museum there, so if you ever find time to visit, it's very interesting to go there. So it started there, it comes up north and comes through Ohio. I don't know how many of you know that it went along Allen Creek. We've heard about the Kelton House over on Broad Road, but it also went along Allen Creek, and there's a lot of markets there and the houses that are there, and goes right on up into Westerville, Gahanna, Westerville. And you've heard of Africa Road up there, and I found out a few years ago it was named that because a lot of Africans would post up or would settle right there on that road. Those were involved in slavery, and set tents up on the road. Couldn't have homes, so they set tents up. So it was named that. Then folks went on up north and went through Oberlin, which I graduated from Oberlin College, and I found a rich history when I went there. And also, and I'll tie that in a little later on, and then it goes on up and goes into Canada, and I didn't know till about 12 years ago where a lot of people went to, and that was Nova Scotia. So it was interesting because I didn't know that. And so then I'll share some other stuff. One of the things that those individuals did that was in Nova Scotia that you may not know is that these were some strong, proud individuals who decided that they would not participate in slavery, so they went up north. These same individuals started their families and had lives going on up there. And one of the games that they played is an old game that came from Egypt, field hockey. It's an old game in Egypt, in Britain, England, and then up in Canada. Well, one of the things that happened as it hit Canada was they began to play this field hockey on ice. And it was like a gentleman's game there. And so then as I saw more history about it and looking at the history, it was actually these descendants, the sons and grandsons of these folks who had went up on this underground through the Underground Railroad, that actually had an intramural league called the Colored Hockey League of Maritime. And what it was they took this game that was kind of moving kind of slow and added a lot of action to it, the ice hockey. The NHL as we know it right now today, that start came right there from African Americans in Nova Scotia. And you can, everything I say, I'll check it, go online and check it out, because I mean, it was really odd for me, and I tell young folks that sometimes they don't want to believe it, so I tell them, go online and check it out, and I hear back from them that actually when you look at the hockey league now, you look at like Atlanta, maybe 2 or 3, I think they have 2, maybe 3 African Americans playing there. Our history says that it is not a sport that involves African Americans, so that's one piece of history for you. Now this is back in 1895 and went all the way up to 1895 to 1925 that there was a league going on. It was in the 1920s that the league stopped. And this was the prominent league that, I mean, these were the most talented. These were the folks who were getting ready for the Stanley Cup. So how many people knew that here? Show me, raise your hand. Okay, that makes me feel really good. Give me some information. So that is an interesting thing there, an interesting story that we talk about there. And all of this is recorded, folks, the history of it and all in terms of moving forward. Let's bring you a little closer here to Columbus, because we're going to try to give you a bridge of time. And so I want to talk about a gentleman named Granville T. Woods, who is from Columbus, Ohio. Now, how many of you heard of Granville T. Woods? Great. How many of you knew he was from Columbus, Ohio? Okay, great, great. Now, some folks say that the street over here on the east side, Granville, is named after him. I wasn't able to find any documentation to verify that, but I have heard that from several sources. Now, he was born on April 23rd, 1856, and he spent most of his early years attending school until he was at the age of 10. And he was interested in the mechanics, and also he got out of school and started working and hanging out early with those folks, but he was actually working, he wasn't getting paid. But folks around the train tracks, all of that, just learning stuff without getting a formal education. His formal education was actually why he was out there working and learning with folks. He got to the point where he knew enough that he could go to school, and it's listed that he went ahead and he went to college, although there's no record of exactly which college that he went to, but several sources indicated that he did go to college, and that was here on the Eastern Coast. So I know that's kind of tough, but I was trying to put it all together, and I tried to line up my history, and I know that Oberlin College, where I went, was in 1933 is where the first African American graduated for a 4-year school period. So I'm not sure exactly what school he went to, but that was a little earlier, but it did indicate that he'd done that. Now, Granville T. Woods, he had a lot of things that he invented, but what he's known for mostly is the transmitter. I mean, he has like over 50 patents, but he's known for the transmitter. Now, what makes it so strong about him, about the transmitter, is that we know that Alexander Granville gets the credit for inventing the telephone. Now, back then, you can understand, this is about a bridge into tomorrow, too. Back then, you can understand the way society was that an African American would not have gotten credit for doing something like that. But Alexander Granville actually invented the telephone where you could hear from up here back to the end of the room. Now, what Granville T. Woods came up with was the transmitter. When you added the transmitter to the phone, now you could go and call over to another side of town, and there was clarity in the voice. Much more clarity. This is Granville T. Woods from Columbus, Ohio, who did that. He did quite a few other things, and he started a company, and because of the difficulty, because of the racial climate that was going on, he started a company and he manufactured, back then, what was called a telegraph phoning. Let me say it right. Telegraph phoning. That's the only time I've seen it was with him. And what that was talking about putting the telegraph and the telephone together so that it could be used on the railroad tracks. Now, this was an interesting thing that he did. He came up with quite a few things, and a lot of things that African Americans invented back then, they were not able to put the patents together on it in order to benefit from them in terms of credit for their invention and also financially. In this case here with Granville T. Woods, he decided to take folks to court. And one of the persons that he took to court was Thomas Edison. He won, and he and Thomas Edison partnered up, and he worked strong with Thomas Edison and the Edison Company. He also worked with another company on there, which ended up being American Bell Telephone Company, and another company which eventually became Western House. And he was like the chief person that was involved in terms of research that was there. A lot of these things that occurred back then, people were aware of, but we didn't talk a lot about. And now we're aware of them, and we still don't talk a lot about those things. We still don't share that information with our young folks. Now, quite a did hear about Granville T. Woods because a lot of things he did, and I wrote them down just in case, but I will not share all of those things that Granville T. Woods did do, but he did do a lot to make life much safer, much more convenient for everybody to do in terms of working with electricity. Another major contributor was, well, I also want to talk about General Electric and engineering. He was very instrumental in them, and you know how powerful GE is now. Another major inventor was Louis Latimer, and he brought light to millions in the world. And what he did was the filament on there. Now here again, working with Thomas Edison, because all these guys were working together back then. His background is that of a draftsman, drawing things up. And I may need a glass of water. Thank you. That's his background is drawing. It was the drawing, putting it all down on paper. Now it's interesting what he did do, because again, we get Thomas Edison is the inventor of the light bulb, as we know. But the light bulb then that was invented would last up to 3 days. What Louis Latimer did was came up with the filament that would go in the light bulb that would let it last much longer, like months at a time, and much brighter. So, you know, those kind of stories, I know when I was a youngster that the history was there, but I didn't always hear that. But that's a major contribution to that. Now, this guy, Louis Latimer, not only helped out in the deal there with Thomas Edison, he also was connected to Alexander Graham Bell. Because Alexander Graham Bell, when he was going to get the patent on the telephone, there was another guy, and I can't remember his name. You know how it is if you come in second place, people forget the name later on. But there was another guy who was doing the same thing. And the reason that Alexander Graham Bell got the credit is because Louis Latimer was the draftsman who drew the plan up for him so that he could get it into the patent shop. Just on the same day, just hours before the other person got it in place. So, thank you. So he was responsible for helping Alexander Graham Bell also in that case. So, you know, I'm just going to give you those couple of names there because you guys, there's a lot of stuff that these gentlemen did that we can look up. And typically, during Black History Month, we talk a lot about something that happened a long time ago. So I want to do the bridge to tomorrow and talk about something still more current. When my son, Jerry Jr. and I came in, he went back in the back and started looking at things in there, and he knew quite a few of them. And by the way, my wife is out of town today, she'd be here, so I'm always representing our family. But we saw the astronauts that were back there. And those are the astronauts that we usually are aware of. But there's a Colonel Frederick D. Gregory, who was the first commander, African-American commander of the shuttle. Now, what this gentleman did, he has an illustrious career where he started very early, served in the Army, in the Air Force, excuse me, as a pilot, a helicopter pilot, and got a number of awards for rescuing people, going into dangerous spots, pulling people out, other helicopters that crashed, he would go in, just a fearless gentleman. So he ended up at a very early age becoming an astronaut. And then when they picked the first 35, he was one of the 3 African Americans that were chosen. The history on him is he had an illustrious career, and he actually went from being one of the first commander of the shuttle to actually being the first administrator, NASA administrator for the United States African American. But what he did was while he was commander, he had the oversight and was very involved in the invention of the night landing gear, so that when the shuttle went up and came down, it could land at nighttime using the radar. So he had to create the cockpit and all for that. Now what he came up with is the same thing that we use right now if we fly commercial and land at night. I mean, this guy is still alive, and this is what he came up with. So a lot of kids don't know it's African American who came up with that, so that the planes that we all fly in can land at nighttime. And this is Frederick Gregory. Okay? So that is something to bring you a little closer to there. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more right now about the bridge to tomorrow. Part of what I had started out with when I was talking about this was a little saying about how can we find the truth if we are busy addressing illusions? How can we find the truth if we are busy addressing illusions? So I'm going to start with race on here. and the different races as opposed to just one human race. Why do we have different races as opposed to considering ourselves just one human race? I'm not sure if you're aware of the history, but as a French scientist, Arthur Gobineau and Francis Galton coined the word eugenics. And eugenics is about studying the difference in genes, what makes the difference in individuals, where your genes are different. And actually the differences in us are so minute compared to the similarities when you talk about different races. But this was something that came up when it was first introduced. What was promoted by the Nazis in terms of what they call a superior race. It wasn't like a thing talking about black, white, it was just about superior race coming up with the differences there. Now, it's interesting that when I talk about Bridge to Tomorrow, how we still talk about those things because, we know people are people. We will claim that we're created by the same God. But when we start looking at one another, we'll start talking about the differences that occur to us. And we place an enormous amount of energy addressing those things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how can we find the truth when we are busy addressing what we call illusions. I'll start off with the first thing on the race, talking about black and white. Now we teach our son that while he understands those terminologies, that there are black folks and there are white folks. Because there isn't that color amongst us. You don't have a black person and a white person. But we took and went to the total end of the spectrum to point out a difference. So the question is, why do we look at each other so differently? Because we're different shades. Now obviously we have different cultures. But you can take a person and they go like 2 degrees of different shade, and people go, okay, they fit in this category, go 3 degrees of different shade, a little more light complected, and they fit in another category. And we go all the way to a point of at what point do we decide we're different? Because we're just different shades, different complexions. At what point do we decide that we are so different that we're like different folks? And that goes both ways. I mean, it goes all the way across the spectrum, not just in America, but around the world. To me, that's an illusion that was set up. The Nazis were trying to say, we're the superior people. So they went and they had these scientists present this stuff, and they began to teach that. But it was an illusion. And we followed up on it and still follow up on it because we will talk about black and white as opposed to lighter shade, dark shade, or whatever the color is, brown, whatever the color is. So we start off with our kids teaching them things that they just learn because we impose that upon them. So we impose upon them that folks are black when folks are brown. You understand what I'm saying? And we start doing that at an early age, so we impose a number of things on ourselves because we've been taught that it's right. Now, my mother would just be upset with me to hear me say this. But when my wife and I went to Africa, we'd heard these things like, you hear it here in America. And I'm just an honest person, I believe in honesty, folks. So we hear things in here that says, we would go, well, African folks from the continent got older. I would hear that, And so when we go to Africa, I'm in a room, I never paid any attention, but I'm in a room, and it's crowded, and I'm smelling body odor. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, that is true. But then I think a little further. Why is it a problem? Why is it a concern? It's a concern because it's a natural thing to have body odor. But we start teaching our kids at a very young age, put some deodorant on. Put it on because that's the right thing to do. Now, I'm pretty sure Procter & Gamble and whoever else sells those products are real happy that we do that. But we teach people that right from a very small age, put some deodorant on. Now, just think if we taught them to be honest, have some compassion and empathy for folks. Right at the same time, we're teaching them to put deodorant on, but how we behave with one another, we're not necessarily teaching them that. We're letting what is considered the mass media or ourselves, our school industry, and all are teaching those things. So now we're talking about Bridge to Tomorrow now, because I'm not going to come and just, say a few things and we're gone, because it's about us challenging myself, us challenging each other. Because we do teach, most of the things that we do are learned behavior, folks. And unless we start changing that, what we learn and what we talk about, and exhibit that with our young folks, they'll continue to do what we've been doing. Now, it doesn't stop there.